Hi everyone, welcome back to the Readology podcast. I'm your host, caseymolinaaa. In today's episode, we're still talking about the amazing book that I've been reading that I talked about last week, and that is 100 essays, or 101 essays that will change the way you think, by Brianna Weist. At any point in time, please feel free to go and get this book. Leave me a comment down below what you think of the book if you get it. And of course, just, any engagement with what we talk about in these episodes is always welcome. If you're tuning in from YouTube, you can see my setup is a little bit different today. I want to do something a little more vibey, so hopefully as time goes on, I'll add something nice in the background. But for now, I've got my little salt lamp that's just out of camera. But without further ado, let's go ahead and let's dive into the episode today. So I actually thought that we would start from chapter 1 of the book. I felt like last week, I really wanted to hop around because I was super excited about the book. I wanted to touch on a lot of things that were just really exciting and groundbreaking for me. But then I thought, you know what, today let's backtrack and let's kind of get back to the meat of the book. And that is literally in chapter 1, which is what drew me to this book so much. Chapter 1 is called Subconscious Behaviors That Are Keeping You from Having the Life That You Want. So I'll kind of spare you the brief historical overview of what it talks about at the beginning of the chapter. But it starts by saying, so much of our inner turmoil is the result of conducting a life we don't inherently desire, only because we have accepted an inner narrative of quote-unquote normal and quote-unquote ideal without even realizing. The fundamentals of any given monoculture tend to surround what we should be living for: nation, religion, self, etc. And there are a number of ways in which our current system has us shooting ourselves in the feet as we try to step forward. Here are 8 of the most pervasive. Number 1, you believe that creating your best life is a matter of deciding what you want and then going after it. But in reality, you are psychologically incapable of being able to predict what will make you happy. Your brain can only perceive what's known, so when you choose what you want for the future, you're actually recreating a solution or an ideal of the past. When things don't work out the way you want them to, you think you failed, only because you didn't recreate something you perceived as desirable. In reality, you likely created something better, but foreign, and your brain misinterpreted it as bad because of that. The moral of the story is, living in the moment isn't as lofty as an ideal, or isn't a lofty ideal reserved for the Zen and enlightened. It's the only way to live a life that isn't infiltrated with illusions. It's the only thing your brain can actually comprehend. I want to unpack that for a minute. I think this is something that a lot of people struggle with in life, in relationships, in their careers, especially people in their 20s. I know I'm going through this right now, kind of living out this life that I thought I wanted for myself, but now I'm here, I'm in the action of living the life that I was like, okay, I want this. And it's just completely not what I thought it would look like or feel like or any of the sort. And now in my head, I'm like, well, am I doing something wrong, or do I just want something different, or was I never sure of what I wanted in the first place? So it's kind of this idea of idealizing a lifestyle and then actually living that lifestyle and realizing it's really not what you thought you wanted. I think this is so applicable to relationships too. It's like sometimes we get stuck in the idea of someone, we get stuck in the idea of loving someone, of having someone, and then we completely forget what it feels like to actually be in that relationship. It's like on a day-to-day basis, are you just happy that you have a significant other, or are you actually happy when you're with that person? I know that's something that I have gotten caught up in a lot in the past, and it's kind of a rude awakening when you start to think like, oh, am I actually happy, or am I just like showing up telling myself I'm happy because I have the thing that I told myself I wanted in order to be happy. So definitely, I know a lot of us probably deal with that. But let's move on to number 2. You extrapolate the present moment because you believe that success is somewhere you arrive, So you are constantly trying to take a snapshot of your life and see if you can be happy yet. I was going to say Snapchat. Okay, yeah, let's keep reading. You convince yourself that any given moment is representative of your life as a whole, because we're wired to believe that success is somewhere we get to when goals are accomplished and things are completed. We're constantly measuring our present moment by how finished they are, how good the story sounds, how someone else would judge the elevator speech. We find ourselves thinking, is this all there is? Because we forget that everything is transitory and no one single instance can summarize the whole. There is nowhere to arrive to. The only thing you're rushing toward is death. Accomplishing goals is not success. How much you expand in the process is. This is really, really important. I feel like we're really just hopping off the deep end here today in this podcast because I've been seeing a lot of TikToks recently talking about this Western ideal of like hustling and goal setting. That is very much that. It very much is a Western ideal. And, you know, I talk to my friends and family about this a lot. Just the idea that in my perfect world, I would probably move to a country that values capitalism less, that allows me to really slow down and live my life and just be in the moment, that values a greater work-life balance, because those are the things that are important to me. And this is what I think a lot of people forget in the process of hustling to get what they want. You don't want the money. Money is this object. It's like the money is not what you want. It's the security you want. It's the ability to live the life that you want. And we are told that money is this thing that buys us that commodity. So I was going to say something else based on this. Yeah, it's this idea that you can't be happy until you accomplish a goal. So it's like this Western ideal that, you know, a lot of capitalist societies operate off of. It's like you set a goal, and once you set that goal, this is important to note, once you set that goal, you're not going to be happy until you reach that goal. But what you don't know is that when you reach that goal, you're just going to set another goal and to further delay your happiness. So I honestly think goal setting is a trap. And maybe that's an unpopular opinion, but yeah, I've really just come to find I think goal setting is a trap because it creates almost this guilt of just like living in the present moment and being happy with what you have. And I think I definitely went through this when I was living with my dad after the pandemic. I briefly mentioned in the past episode how when the pandemic hit, I had to move back from Spain. I did not have my life together. I had no idea what I wanted to be doing. And, you know, essentially I ended up living at home with my dad for 8 months. And in those 8 months, my only job or my only goal was to get a job and move out. And the whole time until I achieved that goal, I was actually miserable. And I look back on that time in my life and I think about what I was doing, and I was spending time with my friends and I was catching up with my family, and I, you know, went to California and I went to Colorado, and you know, I had these great experiences, but I was not able to enjoy any of them because the whole time I was like, well, I don't have a job, so I don't deserve any of this. And that is such a negative mindset to be existing in. Is that if you haven't met your goal or you haven't put in whatever work you feel like you should put in order to deserve happiness, in order to deserve rest, that you're just kind of living on borrowed happiness. And that's not true. It's like in any given moment, we should be able to experience joy and happiness, even if we're not at the end destination. Just like the book says, the end destination is death. That's the only thing we're racing towards. So it's like any moment that you're not finding happiness in because you're too busy wanting for the future, you are just putting off your life. And even as I'm saying it, I'm like, oh, this is hitting me so hard because it's like, you know, I am in a situation now where it's like I talked about previously, I'm living this life that I thought I wanted. And now that I'm living it, I'm realizing it's not quite what I thought I wanted. And now I'm in the process of building something different for myself. But while being in that process, I'm like insanely unhappy. And I won't say insanely. I'll just say on a day-to-day basis, I have so many complaints about where I'm at in life. And this is like a good wake-up call for me to just be like, no, just Be happy in the present moment. Just find joy and the good things in the present moment. So that's just number 2, guys. There's like a whole chapter of this, but I'm going to try and pick some good ones for us. Let's see. Okay, yeah. Number 3, you assume that when it comes to following your quote-unquote gut instincts, happiness is good and fear and pain are bad. When you consider doing something that you truly love and are invested in, you're going to feel an influx of fear and pain, mostly because it will involve being vulnerable. Bad feelings should not always be interpreted as deterrents. They are also indicators that you are doing something frightening and worthwhile. Not wanting to do something would make you feel indifferent about it. Fear equals interest. So important. I want to speak to discipline for a moment. I think if you're ever trying to start a new habit, like exercising, for example, if I talk to so many people about this, exercising and how I structure my exercise so that I actually do it, and what that process was like of me getting on a consistent workout schedule. I feel like that's something that a lot of people struggle with. It's like the consistent working out and how you can stick with it. And that feeling of when your alarm goes off at 5 or 6 a.m. in the morning and you're like, wow, I just really don't want to be here. I really don't want to be doing this. I do this with myself, and I've told my friends to do it. Like, have a conversation with yourself in your head. Just start asking questions like, why don't I want to get up? Because you're tired. And why am I tired? Because you didn't go to bed early last night. But it's like, okay, but if I'm awake right now, can I get up? And it's like, normally the answer is yes. And if the answer is yes, and you're just feeling this tightness, this fear, this frightening feeling in your gut, just start asking why. Why am I feeling this? Well, I don't have time to work out before I start work at 9 a.m. Well, yes, you do. It's 6 a.m. You have 3 hours. So by kind of like talking yourself through these things, you realize your mind puts up all these barriers that don't really make sense. They're irrational fears that you create for yourself because something is so unfamiliar to you. And the same can be said, I think, for any new habit that you're trying to establish. If it feels unfamiliar, your mind wants to protect you from that unfamiliarity. So it's like, red flag, you should not be doing this. Something's wrong. We don't recognize this. But I really challenge you to push back past that wall, because on the other side of that, it's honestly, the feeling is amazing. When you do that 6 a.m. workout before your 9 a.m. call-in time, you realize, oh, I did that. I can do that tomorrow, and I can do that the next day, and as many days as it takes you in order to establish that habit. Okay, number 4. You needlessly create problems and crises in your life because you're afraid of actually living it. This is the reason why I bought this book. I came across this book on TikTok, and I honestly have been so shocked about how impactful it actually is. But the person who was reading the book on TikTok read this part, and it blew my mind. So it says, the pattern of unnecessarily creating crises in your life is actually an avoidance technique. It distracts you from actually having to be vulnerable or held accountable for whatever it is you're afraid of. You're never upset for the reason you think you are. At the core of your desire to create a problem is simply the fear of being who you are and living the life you want. I was having a very deep conversation with my brother a little while ago, and we were talking about this very thing. We were talking about how, almost going back to goal setting and, creating goals for yourself that you then reach, and then you create another goal. We, as humans, it's almost like human nature, unless you train yourself out of it, we almost want to be unhappy. Because if we are unhappy, we have something to complain about. We can tangibly point our finger at something and say, I can't have the things I want because look at that big glaring thing in my life that's wrong. That's the reason why I can't have what I want. But the reality is that we make that up in our head. And if we released that idea of, this outside force is what is controlling our happiness, what we find is actually scarier than any outside force is ourselves, literally being the change maker in our lives, literally being the only one that is responsible for making change and creating the lives that we want. And it's scarier to believe that than it is to believe that you don't have control over your life and you don't have control or the ability to create the life you want. I think about that every day. Every day when I don't feel like making content, or when anything, honestly, anything that I've ever wanted to do in my life, and I'm like, oh, I just don't feel like doing this. The first thing I do is acknowledge that I don't feel like doing this. And then after that, I'm like, all right, well, I'm here. I'm showing up because I don't want to be the reason why I don't live the life that I want. So, man, guys, this is getting deep. All right, number 5. You think that to change your beliefs, you have to adopt a new line of thinking. Rather, seek experiences that make that thinking self-evident. So this is a little confusing, but it further breaks it down. A belief is what you know to be true because experience has made it evident to you. If you want to change your life, change your beliefs. If you want to change your beliefs, go out and have experiences that make them real to you, not the opposite way around. So the opposite way around would be changing your beliefs and then going out and living those experiences, but it's saying, go do the things that don't quite make sense to you because you don't believe in them. And then once you've had the experience and it's proved you and your psyche otherwise, then there you go. That's self-evident that what you thought about something is wrong. It leaves room for creativity. It leaves room for self-growth. It leaves room for mental expansion. I don't feel like we have to harp on that one too much, but that one's still pretty cool. Okay. Number 6. You think problems are roadblocks to achieving what you want, when in reality, they are pathways. Marcus Aurelius sums this up well. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Simply running into a problem forces you to take action to resolve it. That action will inevitably lead you to think differently, behave differently, and choose differently. The problem becomes a catalyst for you to actualize the life you always wanted. It pushes you from your comfort zone. That's all. So, it's that age-old quote that's like, when God closes one door, he opens 3 more. I believe this to be true. And just one nugget of wisdom that I think works so well in my life is this idea that stagnation is your enemy. Like, problems and things not going your way are not your enemy. Because whether something's going positively or negatively, what matters the most is that it's in motion. So if you're in a situation where you're feeling stagnant, stagnation is what the problem is. The problem is not the problem. Stagnation is the problem. So if you have a problem, really lean into that problem. Really activate the negatives in whatever situation it is you're dealing with or you're wondering about. Because I guarantee you, when you dive into that, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, or there is, like the book was talking about, there's a pathway out into something new. And that's what you're seeking. Sometimes you're not even seeking better. Sometimes you're not seeking more or less. You're just seeking different. You need to keep exposing yourself to things. And so I think in situations, how a lot of people become stuck is that they become stagnant without realizing it, and then they become comfortable in the stagnation, and they start to wonder why they can't change their lives, or why they can't do the thing that they want to do. And it's because stagnation is the problem. So I think something that, I'm going to be 25 this year. I think something that I'm really adapting in my life is this idea of fail hard, fail fast. And even as I say that, it sounds absolutely terrifying to me to fail at anything. I can't significantly point my finger at anything and say that I have truly failed at it. Maybe Gov school in middle school. I don't know if you guys remember, governor school was this huge thing that you had to submit applications for, and then it was a summer camp for really smart kids. That's probably the only thing I failed at. I didn't get in, but I digress. But no, anything else that I have gone after in my life, anything else that I really wanted, I can't say I failed at it. Or I can tell you that if it wasn't for me, if I was getting all these signs that something wasn't for me, instead of releasing it and accepting that I had failed, I white knuckled it. And I was like, no, there's no way. This can't be for me. I'm going to hold on to this. This is for me. This is my thing. But it's no, just fail gracefully. When things aren't working out, allow them to flow, allow the situation, allow the place, the job, the career, the person and relationship to just flow from your life. So yeah, that's my mantra for 25. Fail hard, fail fast. Because I can guarantee you the faster you do that, the faster you will just come into all of these opportunities and these synchronicities and these divine timing situations where things were just meant for you. Yeah. Wow. I'm just reflecting on what I'm saying as I'm saying it. But we're almost finished up here. So, number 7, you think your past defines you, and worse, you think that it is can I talk? It is an unchangeable reality, when really your perception of it changes as you do. Because experience is always multidimensional. There are a variety of memories, experiences, feelings, gists that you choose to recall, and what you choose is indicative of your present state of mind. So many people get caught up in allowing the past to define them or haunt them, simply because they have not evolved to the place of seeing how the past did not prevent them from achieving the life they want. It facilitated it. This doesn't mean to disregard or gloss over painful or traumatic events, but simply to be able to recall them with acceptance and to be able to place them in the storyline of your personal evolution. Yes, 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 and more times yes. People who say that they have regrets, or people who are very caught up on who they were in the past or mistakes that they made in the past, it makes me really sad, because I think a fundamental part of being able to move forward and truly grow into yourself and further create yourself, or rather like uncreate all of the barriers that our society and this life places on us, is really just coming to terms with who you are and what you've been through. It's owning that 100% in all of its ugly moments, in all of the moments where you thought you were pathetic or worth nothing. It is like literally showing up for yourself and like giving that version of yourself that you used to hate the biggest hug, and being like, you know what, I love you, and we're here now for everything that you have been through so that I could be here, because we're not that person anymore. I think honestly that's one of the biggest acts of self-love. And I wish people value that more. Like love yourself at every single stage. Like I have to look back at pictures when I was 10 years old and I'm like, Mom, why did you let me look like that? I have to hug that 10-year-old and just be like, I love you so much, because you were me. You were the reason why I'm here being me right now. So just remember that self-love. And then the last one before we wrap up this episode: you try to change other people, situations, and things, or you just complain or get upset about them, when anger equals self-recognition. Most negative emotional reactions are you identifying a dissociated aspect of yourself. Your shadow selves are the parts of you that at some point you were conditioned to believe were not okay. So you suppress them and have done everything in your power to not acknowledge them. You don't actually dislike these parts of yourself, though. So when you see somebody else displaying one of these traits, it's infuriating. Not because you inherently dislike it, but because you have to fight your desire to fully integrate it into your whole consciousness. The things you love about others are the things you love about yourself. The things you hate about others are the things you cannot see in yourself. Wow. Just want to let that ruminate for a moment. That's honestly, shadow work is something that I have been wanting to dive into, but something that I'm equally afraid to dive into. But I feel like I keep getting all these signals, all of these synchronicities, if you will, that are telling me to do some shadow work, that are telling me to kind of figure out more about myself in that area. Because it's all a healing journey. It all is really a healing journey, and we all have to go on it, and really doing your healing, coming to terms, like I said earlier, with your past in that way is what's going to facilitate your future and what's going to give you the things that you want out of your future. So never underestimate the power of not necessarily revisiting painful experiences, but just revisiting things. Whenever something comes up in yourself, whenever a trigger is presented, that's an amazing opportunity to just ask yourself, why am I triggered by this situation, by these people? What is this drawing up in me, and what does that say about me and my present state? So I'm going to leave you guys with that. I'm also going to wipe the slight oil from under my eyes. I really try and look kind of nice for these podcasts, but I feel like I just come as I am, and I hope you guys feel free to just come as you are in the comments. Please leave me a comment if any of this spoke to you. If you feel called to interact or engage with any of this, I would love that. I would love for us to just have like a really wholesome I'm thinking conversation in the comments. But nevertheless, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Readology. If you're watching this on YouTube, I do have a Spotify, so you can go ahead and type in Readology on Spotify and you can find me there. I'm also wherever else you get your podcasts, like Apple Podcasts and the Anchor app. So thank you guys so much for listening. And I have one more plug. If you haven't already, please give me a follow on my Instagram account and any other accounts that I can't think of right now. I will list in the description box of not only the episode, but also the YouTube. The YouTube. All right, guys. So I'll see you in my next episode. Bye.